Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Robin Shuckburgh, and you find me today outside the Plough at Clanfield. This is an absolutely classic Cotswold hotel. It's one of the places I ought to declare an interest. I do some work here. I talk about gin. Martin Aegis, who runs this, recognised the importance of the gin industry at a very early stage, and he opened a thing called the Gin Pantry. Now, in the Gin Pantry inside this hotel, there are over 400 different gins, and they're very, very exciting to taste. The hotel also has 11 bedrooms, all of which are wonderful, some rather more modern than others, but it's a perfect small hotel and an excellent restaurant where the chef produces some very delicious food indeed. But we're here to see the gin. We're going to talk a little bit about its history. We might even taste one. But we will most certainly have a look at the extraordinary little gin pantry. Come with me. The history of gin is quite an extraordinary one. It was invented in Amsterdam, almost certainly a long time ago, in the 1500s, by an apothecary who decided it would be a good idea to flavour the alcohol he was using as a medicine, which they all did in those days, mainly because it was the only thing that made you feel better and stood between you and the leeches and the men with knives to lop bits off you. And he decided it would be a good idea to flavour it with juniper, which he did, and then, to his astonishment, his patients started to come back to him on a rather more regular basis. I think they started to drink it recreationally, and he found himself with a very tidy business. They make gin in Holland a lot still. It's one of the national drinks. This is one of them. It comes in these rather beautiful earthenware bottles, which are delightful. It's about as close as you're likely to get to the original gin. But then it made the jump to London, partly because William of Orange, King of England, was a Dutchman, and he introduced the sort of culture of spirit drinking to a London that was probably not particularly well equipped to take it, and it certainly became a problem in London. Gin was very cheap and became the staple drink of the poor, along amazingly with oysters, which sounds okay, except that oysters came out of the Thames, and the Thames at the time was also used as an open sewer for the city, so I think that probably wasn't a great idea. But it did create a big social problem. Gin gained itself a very bad reputation for a while. It was then that it got its nickname of Mother's Ruin, because along with poverty of that kind goes a lot of prostitution, and in those days unwanted pregnancies went along with that, and they thought that if you drank enough gin you could solve that problem, which was probably true because the gin they were making was truly unpleasant at the time. However, after the end of William and Mary's reign and the beginning of Queen Anne's reign, things started to get under control, and then her successor, King George, started really to take a hold of the problem, and gin regained its respectability. It's a very simple spirit. It's flavoured with a technique known as the London system. Now, this is a still, ladies and gentlemen. It's very beautiful. You can buy these things online. If you do, however, you're likely to be bombarded with requests from the Customs and Excise people for license money, because, in fact, I'd rather suggest that you didn't bother. But it's very simple gin. You make it by putting alcohol, straight 98% alcohol, in the pot of the bottom of the still. You warm it, and as it evaporates, just above the pot is a thing called a botanic sieve. Now, on that you put the things with which you want to flavour your gin. So juniper must be at least 40% by volume of whatever it is you put on there, but after that, frankly, the world is your oyster, and people use all kinds of things to flavour gin these days. And as the vapors pass through these things, it picks up the flavors of those wonderful botanicals. And then in the usual way of a still, it gets drawn up through this lovely onion-shaped thing, which is like an accelerator, into the swan neck where it turns back into liquid. Through the condenser, comes out the other end as a flavored alcohol. And it's a very, very simple technique. As a result, of course, everybody's trying to do it now. The joy about it is that all you need to do then is to cut it with a bit of water to reduce the alcohol levels, and then you can put it in a bottle and sell it. So the cash flow consequences are absolutely wonderful. So the respectability of gin having been restored, at least by the beginning of the 20th century, it became a really fashionable drink amongst the wealthy. This is an unusual thing to happen to anything, actually, to make a jump from being the sort of staple drink of the poor to becoming a kind of aristocratic drink, like the gin and tonic certainly was. That mainly happened in India, where the taste was developed when we colonized India for gin and tonic. But by the beginning of the 20th century, it really was a respectable drink. But none of this explains what is happening now, because the incredible boom in gin is a worldwide phenomenon. This is not just something happening in this country. It's right round the world. They're making gin in the outback in Australia and through most of the Americas. And there's even a still on the northernmost island of the Hebrides where he flavors his gin with seaweed. It's extremely good, I understand. And we, frankly, have real difficulty in understanding why that's happened. I've had some experience of trying to launch spirit brands in my long career in the drinks business, and it's not an easy business to do. But it has gone completely ballistic now. But we think we may know who started it. And I think I can lay the credit for this astonishing boom in gin at the feet of one woman called Leslie Gracie, who is the astonishing master blender of a whiskey distillery in Scotland called Grant's. They make a whiskey called Grant's Standfast. And she, for many years, working for Grant's as their, eventually as their master blender, but throughout her career with them, experimented with gin recipes for certainly decades, probably over 30 years, until eventually, in a rather wonderful coincidental way, she discovered the two stills with which she now makes her very famous Hendrick's gin. And the astonishing thing about this is that we all feel it's been around for ages, years and years, but in fact it was launched just at the tail end of the 20th century, so no more than 17 years ago. And it started in motion the process of people recognizing that there was some other flavor to gin than just the standard Gordon's style gin and Schweppes tonic. Hendrick's was an absolute life changer, and on the back of it there are now thousands of gins worldwide. There are more than 700 made in the British Isles alone. It's an extraordinary boom, and I think very exciting. It's a marvelous new world in which we can experiment. There are no rules, of course, because there are so many amazing flavors in gin. You have to find your own comfort zone of sweetness and bitterness and spiciness, that's the sort of style you like. But there are one or two things worth bearing in mind. Just two I'll mention. The first thing is that I think gin and tonic is best served in a nice big glass like this. There's a slight counterintuitive thing about this. If you put a lot of ice in a big glass and then put a small amount of liquid in it, the liquid gets cold very quickly and you get marginally less melt from the ice than you would if you just put a block of ice in to a glass. So a big glass with lots of ice is my preference for a gin and tonic. The next thing is never let your barman put any tonic water in your gin. If you're going to drink a beautiful gin made by all these people so carefully, you are the only person in the world who knows how strong you like to drink it. So never allow a barman to put anything in your gin except you're the only person who can. That's the only other rule, really. Experiment to your heart's content. I'm sure you'll love it. And if ever you want to come and find out more about the history of this extraordinary drink, maybe even taste a range of drinks, remember the Gin Pantry at the Plough in Clanfield has a huge choice and I do the talks here, so it would be nice to see you. Here we are inside the amazing Gin Pantry, where this small space has more than 400 gins. This is the brainchild of Martin Aegis, who owns this wonderful hotel. And the selection is quite extraordinary. The lovely thing is that all the bottles are open, and you can come in here and you can sniff to your heart's content to try and find the gin that you really like. It is from this selection that we do gin tastings here on a regular basis. It is enormous fun and fairly daunting. I started about a year ago when I first started doing talks here, trying to taste them all. And you can only do a certain number a week, and because my brain is now addled and old, I can't even remember what the first ones I tasted like. So it's a never-ending circle. I shall be tasting these gins probably for the rest of my life. Well, that was fun. I do enjoy the gins here, I must admit. Now, if you want to see some more of our programs, remember you can find us on Facebook, you can tweet at Cotswold Explore, or you can find us on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for free. We'll see you next month.